Welcome to Shadowscast episode 2, hosted by me at the Casting Shadows blog. This episode will deal with play by email and using Seoul as an RPG setting. Kind of a first look at that topic. And our first review. If you were going to set a game in Seoul, what would you say are the 3 most important elements to ensure to get across the sense of what it's like to really be here?
1, unless you are from New York City or Los Angeles, you have no concept of how many people actually live here. There are, at any given point, between 12 and 15 million people in this city. It's very easy to be lonely, but you will never be alone. At any given point, in a 24-hour period, unless you are living in one of the little neighborhood hives of small houses, there will always be somebody on the street. Wi-Fi is everywhere. The internet, if you're doing a modern kind of Shadowrun type setting, that would be great because the internet is everywhere. Koreans love the word ubiquitous, and it does apply here very well. Vast underground transportation system, which makes it easy to get around. While not as bad as Japan, you will be constantly bombarded with cuteness, which can be annoying. And another thing, that as a player, to get across to players, unless you are playing a Korean, for whatever reason in the game, no matter how well you speak the language, you might have 5 points in linguistics, and they're all based on Korean. You will never be fully accepted. You will always be an outsider. So the homogeneity of the culture is something that would really be important to get across to people.
So in our last episode, we talked about becoming a GM again after nearly 30 years, and you addressed that quite well. And then so I thought I'd ask you about the period where we couldn't find other players, and we were forced to use play-by-post, which I quite enjoy, but can be a challenge. So you tried to run one with me as the player, and I was curious what you thought of as pitfalls that might not be immediately noticeable to someone who's thinking about setting up a play-by-email.
Okay. Play-by-email has some very interesting advantages and some very interesting disadvantages to actually playing with people. For example, there is the over and under comprehension of the written word.
Meaning?
Everything as a GM, everything that you write has to have a specific meaning or purpose to what you're doing. There's no throwaway lines there. My example of that was the game when we were playing. I was introducing some of the characters in your safe house, and one of them was this old woman who, for whatever reason, I made her sort of a little more mysterious than she was when I originally envisioned it. And her daughter made this comment, sometimes she thinks she's a witch. Which really was, in my mind, a complete throwaway comment. But it caused a huge outburst from your character to, what, she's a witch? What? And it was just one of those points where I went, it was just a joke.
Well, I was playing a paladin.
Fair enough. And you were playing a paladin, so it was completely in character for you to react that way. But it really was just a throwaway line for me. On the reverse of that, when you were running a game, you dropped a hint about this bad guy who had made his way into our party, which I looked at. It was a pretty funny comment. You designed it as a funny comment. I looked at it as a funny comment and went, that's funny, and continued on. I've read that post over many, many times, and you can read that post too, here. Read that post many times, and I didn't catch that hint that you were dropping until much later, when it became apparent that this was the bad guy. Simply because I was reading too much, or too little into what is actually being said.
Okay. Anything else?
The other thing is a happy compromise. But when you're playing face to face, obviously you can tell if somebody's joking. You can tell if somebody doesn't get it. But in an email game or a post-based game, it's impossible to know until the person responds whether or not they understood what you meant, or whether they took it the way you meant it to be taken. And so it's much more thought gets put into it. And if you're not really a wordsmith, then it can become a lot more challenging. You can't just wing it like you do in a game when there's people face to face, and you've got your dungeon all planned out, and the party decides to not go into that cave. They're going to go check out the ruin on the hill.
Right. That's something I definitely agree with. That no throwaway lines is a very key point. The game master or the player can be left totally confused as to why on earth someone has reacted the way they have based on what was written. And it's not until you go back and read it later with that insight that you realize that you really did not communicate as clearly as you thought you were doing, or you totally glossed over what was read
and reacted immediately in an immediate reply post. We've had months between posts in our game, and we've had days where there have been 20 posts back and forth, rapid fire. And there are times I'm definitely guilty of it. I've got in my head what the scene is what's happening. I read something you wrote, immediately respond to it, and then it's not until later on when I can go back and look at it word for word what you actually wrote, and I go, oh yeah, I missed that. I missed that.
right.
I wasn't where this was going.
So, then, what would you say are essential tips for starting your own play by email?
Essential tips. Have one thread for the game and one thread for out-of-character comments. Establish some very clear rules in terms of writing, is this your character speaking? Is this your character thinking? Is this you asking? Which is, of course, what the OOC thread is for. But very specific rules on how you're going to deal with dice rolls. You will assume that the people you're playing with are honorable. So you can say, all right, roll for this, and, oh, look, I got a 20, again. Come on. Fucking break. So now it's also possible to use some sort of dice rolling apps and things like that. Or what we're intending to do is to allow the DM
to roll everything.
Yeah. And I just will assume that you're being honorable. It's your story that you're telling me, so if you don't really want me to succeed in that roll, then you can just, yeah, I rolled this and you failed. That's fine. I'll go with the story.
That's a whole narrative kettle of fish that we can address another day. All right.
Railroading.
And you.
And you.
Okay. Thanks for chatting.
No problem. Thanks for being chatted at.
As I'm not a real fan of reviews, it was a little difficult to decide what to do as a review once I decided to include them in these Shadowscast episodes. For this episode, I thought the easiest way around it would be to not so much review a product as to review a method. So using my Android tablet and some PDF readers, let's take a look at some RPG products and how you can use them at the table. Okay. So starting out, let's take a look at All for One, which is a game I love a lot, but using Adobe Reader, I find a little frustrating. Okay, now, with recent updates to Adobe Reader, the game book loads up fairly quickly, much more quickly than it ever used to, and it freezes almost not at all now. And if you were just sitting around reading, this would be perfectly acceptable. But let's say you're at the game table and you need to reference a chart and you know it's on page, 129. So you'd like to be able to go there quickly. So, page 129, you see, not like I'm asking it to do very much, but apparently it's too much. Okay? Frustrating. So, let's try that again with the recently updated Kindle app. Right, so I said that I wanted to go to page 129. So, sliding along, 129. Bang. There we are. Big difference, right? Now, I guess normally you'd read this way. So with the Kindle app, you can just slide back and forth. Great, huh? Okay. Expand text, shrink text. And to navigate, just tap the bottom of the screen. No guesswork like in Adobe. Will it appear or won't it appear? And slide to wherever you need to go. Handy. Okay, let's back out of there. Let's also take a look at a very heavily layered one. Let's take a look at Total Warfare. Again, starting with Adobe Reader. Okay, good start. Now this particular PDF has been working much better with Adobe Reader than it did initially before Adobe's recent updates. But as you can see, it just takes a long time to load. And this kind of delay would be frustrating even if you were just sitting around reading. But page after page of blank nothing while you're sitting at the game table is just unacceptable, particularly in a chart and detail heavy game like Battletech. Okay. So, again, in the Kindle, okay, this is another nice thing. I haven't looked at Total Warfare for a while, but Kindle remembers where I was for every PDF and every book that I've looked at. So that's kind of nice. So let's go back to the cover. Okay. See if I can get my big finger in there. Okay. Okay. Not perfect, but steady. And again, using page 129 as our random example, let's blast ahead to 129 or 130, 129. Bang, there we go. Doing that in Adobe, Total Warfare, Adobe Reader, 129. Now when the app first starts up, you can easily access this slider bar at the bottom. Any other time is like a crapshoot. Okay, so we're still waiting for the page 129 to load. Yeah, okay. So, looking at Total Warfare in QPDF notes. Loading document. Bang, there it is. Now, the one advantage of this program is being able to annotate. Personally, I don't have any use for that, but a lot of people mention it. This one does it. However, I find that navigation is tricky. Page by page is okay. Sort of. But if you want to scroll, it's really something that you have to forget about. Okay? Another beautiful one, Hollow Earth Expedition. Last point, let's look at it in PDF to go. Yeah. Go where? Oh, it actually just appeared as we were leaving. Alright, so Hollow Earth Expedition in the Kindle. Bang. Okay. So not without lag. That's a blank page. Not without lag, but you know. There you have it. Your mileage may vary, but somehow at this point in time, I doubt it. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this look inside PDF readers for Android. Now they're improving all the time, which is a good thing.